I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the bad.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I'm Matt and as always I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Eddie Ekwo as we dissect a pivotal weekend of NFL action which saw two potential Super Bowl matchups as well as many teams all but confirming their place in the postseason showdown that is the playoffs. Eddie, just quickly, what caught your eye this weekend?
First of all, I love that intro. So let's do more of that.
That's the last nice thing I'll say about you, Eddie.
But listen, right? If you told me at the start of the season that we will see the Lions and the Bills in a 48-42 shootout, that looked like something straight out of Madden, I would have just been laughing. But Josh Allen might have just written his MVP acceptance speech with that performance. But you know what stuck with me more, man? The Dolphins. I don't know if it's the Florida heat or the playoff pressure, but they folded like a bad poker hand. That was their must-win game, and they rolled a pair of twos. Meanwhile, Philly's out here looking like a team that knows exactly who they're doing. Like I say, no flash, just dominance. They've embraced their identity. It's like watching a well-oiled machine. And okay, shout out to the Rams for sneaking into that fourth seed, right? The NFC West race is looking like a family reunion where nobody likes each other.
Absolutely, mate. I think you summed it up pretty well there. But look, we will go through all the main talking points of last week. But before we do, let's just summarize what went down, what was in some of the key matches from last weekend. So, as Eddie was mentioning, in the first of two big matchups this weekend, Josh Allen could well have sealed the MVP for the year as he led the Buffalo Bills to an impressive 48-42 win over the Detroit Lions, who suffered their first defeat since week 2. The other leading NFC franchise fared better though, as the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 27-13 in the Battle of Pennsylvania. So whilst the Steelers' playoff place may be certain, their third seed position could be pinched by the Baltimore Ravens, who took advantage of Pittsburgh's loss with a convincing 35-14 victory over a dejected, poor-looking New York Giants to go a single game behind the Steelers. Elsewhere in the AFC, as Eddie so nicely mentioned, the Texans clinched the AFC South division and their playoff place by beating the Miami Dolphins 2012, all but ending Miami's slim chance of the playoff place. The Denver Broncos beat the Indianapolis Colts 31-13 in a big playoff battle to more or less secure their place in the postseason as well. Whilst in the NFC, the Minnesota Vikings took advantage of the Lions' defeat by going level with a 12-2 record after beating the Chicago Bears and clinching their postseason participation. But the question is, as we'll talk about later, can they also threaten the top two seeds? Elsewhere in the NFC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders all strengthened their playoff ambitions with victories over the weekend, whilst the LA Rams took the place of the Seattle Seahawks as the fourth seed in the NFC as they beat the San Francisco 49ers on Thursday Night Football. But there's surely more twists and turns left yet in that division. And finally, it says here that the Carolina Panthers lost, but I ran out of notes, so I couldn't tell you who actually beat them. And that was week 15. Right, so let's start off with the big game of the week. We've already mentioned it twice. It was the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions. Now, this was an incredible match as the Bills ran out 48-42 victory over this absolute backcrap crazy game. But, Eddie, let's once again start with Josh Allen. 362 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 68 yards off 11 runs. I mean, that's surely the MVP for him. Sewed up. He was simply sensational, wasn't he, Eddie?
He was sensational, Matt. And listen, this man didn't just lock up the MVP. He threw away the key and told everyone, find your way in. Like, look, when you put up 6 touchdowns in a must-win game. Because let's not kid ourselves, right? They had a stinker, right? The last game, right? They lost the last game. I mean, he played well, but they lost. And at this point in time, it's wins and losses, right? Shannon Sharp used to say that if you come to my restaurant, I only serve 2 things on my menu: wins and losses. Which one do you want to order? And, listen, right? It was a team that hadn't lost, since week 4, right? So you're sending a message there. You're saying this wasn't just the win. This was, I'm the best player on the court kind of thing. It's like, like when you're like playing football and, you have that guy who's like a very good midfielder and it's like, always on the ball, and then he comes late. And then as soon as he comes in, everyone is like relaxed because they know that, okay, he's got it. He's literally got it. So this is how Josh Allen was just saying, hey, listen, you guys, I've got this MVP. No one's going to catch me now. I think, you had the likes of Saquon Barkley floating with it. Some people talked about Jared Goff, and Lamar. But I mean, I know Lamar, did well, and we'll probably touch on his game as well. But I think, Josh Allen has been solid, not flashy, but solid. He's got a highlight reel, definitely the MVP in my book.
No, absolutely. I think it's, I think it's getting increasingly difficult to argue that point. I mean, I think it was in the UK TV coverage, Jason Bell, former player, said it best. It was just like him it was like being on the schoolyard, right? Yeah. And then he's just the best player on the schoolyard. Nobody could touch him, right? Yeah. He's playing with all these other little kids around him, absolutely bossing them. And it was everything. It was the throws. It was the cross the field, it was cross field throws. It was the way he used his legs, just incredibly smart play. And, if you get down to the playoffs, if you get in a playoff race and you're against a team, say someone like that, they may well come up against Kansas City again.
Yeah.
And you're in a shootout against Mahomes.
Yeah.
You have to know that every time you get the ball, you're going to score. And that's exactly what these guys look like at the moment. Yeah. And I mean, multiple 40-plus games against the Lions are a very aggressive, very brave side. Yeah. I mean, you saw that with the onside kick they tried twice. Certainly when they did it really early with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but they did what they needed to do. They went up early they took three score lead, and they just never looked, the Lions just could not get back into it.
They couldn't. And, Dan Campbell has done this a few times. And guys, if you don't know this, last season, right, one of the things, that got the Lions out of the playoffs and the run to the Super Bowl was Dan Campbell went, on 4th down, instead of taking the field goal, he went for it. Now, he's notorious doing this. He did that against the Cowboys last season, if you remember, and the Cowboys won the game. And I know he wants to kind of like say, I'm the guy, I trust my players. But sometimes when you're playing a game, you have to understand who's on the other side of the pitch. In boxing, they say styles make fights. And when you've got Josh Allen, on the other side, you cannot afford to be leaving points in the field. Got to take points, whether it's 3 or 6 or 7, got to take them every time you get to the red zone. And for me, that's one thing I think that the Lions have to be careful about, because, they already now, if the Lions have got 17 starters on IR, right? They're already battling with injuries. So the games are not just going to be like the way it was in the first 5 weeks of the season where they're just going to steamroll everyone. I think what we saw, against the Bills is going to be what you're going to see going forward in terms of close games, everyone trading points, and you've got to take every single point off the table. So for me, I think the Lions lost it, in that game by, just not playing winning football.
Yeah. I mean, there's playing aggressive and there's playing smart. I mean, you look at some of the stats with Jared Goff. I mean, you look at the stats, very good game, 495 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That is very impressive numbers. I think the risk for the Lions at the moment, you mentioned the injuries. The injuries will catch up with you. the race in the NFC, which we'll touch on later, certainly for the playoffs, is incredibly tight. So they're still the first seed at the moment, and that's because of their divisional record.
Yeah.
Compared to the Vikings and compared to the Eagles. But if they lose another game, they could find themselves third seed.
Yeah.
And they could find themselves actually playing an extra game. Now, really what you want to be doing in this situation is trying to confirm that first seed, that second seed, so you get that bye week. You get that week off, you get some time, get some players sometimes to time to recover. It's gonna be tough. Now look, you can play the Bills, you can lose to the Bills. The Bills are an exceptional team. Josh Allen's an exceptional quarterback. Where do you think this defeat leaves the Lions, though, going into playoffs? We know where the Bills are going to. We know where to lead the Bills. They are one of the best teams in the AFC in all of football at the moment. You know they could well get to divisional, and they'll probably lose to Kansas City Chiefs. That's just the way it goes. But where do you think this leaves the Lions in the NFC going into the playoffs?
I think it leaves them looking over their shoulder. They are walking down a dark alley, and they're not quite sure what's on the other end. Because the NFC race right now has got 3 genuine teams that can get that number 1 spot. The Vikings can do it. In fact, the Vikings win their next 3 games, they're going to get the number 1 spot. So they're not to be taken lightly. And they've got winnable games, right? The Vikings have definitely got winnable games. So I think the Lions right now cannot afford a slip off. They have got to lock this thing down. They've got the Eagles breathing down their neck, who look, really, really incredible. We're going to touch on the Eagles as well. But for me, I think the Lions, they've lost a lot of key players. We just had David Montgomery, he's out for the season as well. They lost Aiden Hutchinson, a while ago. They're literally dropping like flies, and this is the game of attrition, right? It's going to catch up with them. So I think the Lions right now will be thinking, can we get healthy, and can we get healthy quick?
No, absolutely. I think it's the running in the NFC especially is going to be particularly exciting. Certainly more exciting in the AFC anyway. But you mentioned it, so let's move on now to the Philadelphia Eagles and their victory in a Battle of Pennsylvania against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They came out 27-13 in this game. This was another potential Super Bowl matchup, with 2 of the top 3 seeds in both the NFC and the AFC. Now, last week, Eddie, about the Eagles particularly, we discussed some of the frustrations that some of the Eagles wide receivers displayed post-game in their victory last week, really calling out their quarterback Jalen Hurts, when they said that their main issue in the game was passing. Right. We said, and you've said it yourself earlier, that the Eagles are a team who know exactly who they are and where they are. You've got Saquon Barkley is probably one of the most leading offenses in the entire of NFL at the moment. Right now, roll on a week and everything flips on its head. Barkley gets knocked about, got roughed up earlier on in the game, and he only picked up 65 yards, which therefore means that the Eagles have to change their game. Hurts throws for 290 yards, 2 touchdowns with both Brown and Smith, 2 of the guys who were some of the ringleaders in the frustration last week, both getting 100 yards and a touchdown each, and they now move to 10 victories in a row. So, this was a good victory for Eagles. It certainly showed they have a different way of winning. Okay, what did you make of this one?
I like a good old-fashioned, show off, right? Because that's what the Eagles did, right? The Eagles, showed up on the prom. I was like, I've got a better girlfriend than you have. I'm rolling in, with my limousine. You guys are rolling with your Ford Fiesta. Nothing against Ford Fiesta, but you're
talking from experience, get out, Eddie. Who hurt you? I know. Did he used to have a Ford Fiesta? Is that what it is? And someone's rolled up and made you look cheap.
It's still raw. It's still raw.
Still raw. I'm sorry about that, mate. I didn't mean to put you down like that.
It's still raw, but listen, the Eagles are showing off that. Say, listen, if you want to play it on the ground, we can play it on the ground. If you want to take it to the skies, we can take it to the skies. And AJ Brown, Smitty as well. with Jalen Hurts. It was more like, are you guys not entertained? Is this what you guys were looking for, kind of thing?
You're not
Um,
entertained.
I mean, listen, right? The Eagles have got a balanced team. You've got to say they look very strong. They look good. Um, you know, if they stick to their identity, and I say this all the time, especially with Ravens, right? You stick to your identity, you run the ball, lean on your defense, you should be fine. And every now and then you get your wide receivers involved. Now, would they always have games where each of their wide receivers go 100 yards? Maybe not, but you want to keep the defense guessing, right? If they load up the box, meaning that they bring lots of people to the scrimmage, you want to be able to allow your AJ Brown to go one on one on the cornerbacks. And there's not a lot of cornerbacks that will go one on one on AJ Brown. He will just skin you,
Mhm.
So for me, I think the Eagles are looking very comfortable, right? And they just need to worry about overconfidence. That's the only thing I'll say to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we said last week that this frustration, this almost this selfishness attitude with some of these ROCs, it could come back to haunt them. But I think you're right. I think this weekend show they've got different weapons. That if Barkley's not there, they've got other ways to hurt you. This is very much a team performance, and it will keep defenses guessing as we go into the playoffs. But let's look at the other team across the gridiron there, which was obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, where do you think? How do you think this impacts them? I think that one of the biggest takeaways, obviously, they lost a game, been a great run of form, but obviously TJ Watt goes down. Huge player for them. They are. I think there's some positive noises saying he should be available for the match against the Ravens next week. But if he isn't, that's a huge loss for them. He's one of the leading defensive players in the league.
Yeah, it's huge, huge. You can't get any bigger than TJ Watt, defensive player of the year. He single-handedly can win a game, on his
Mm-hmm.
own. You know that he's that kind of player. I don't know if it changes my opinion about the Steelers, right? They didn't get it done this week. But I mean, if you're gonna run for 9 yards, I think Justin Field ran for 8 yards. They had no running game at all, in that game. And the Steelers is all about play good defense, run the ball. Remember that game against the Ravens that they won it by kicking field goals.
Mm-hmm.
The defense has to come up top. But listen, I think they got the game plan wrong. I trust Mike Tomlin to get it right. So I don't know if I am necessarily worried about them. I will still think that they're a dark horse,
Mm-hmm.
going into the playoffs, the team that you don't want to meet. Because like we said, like if TJ Watts is playing very well, you've got problems. So listen, they take a loss. It's difficult to go undefeated, and especially when you play a team that's outside of your division, that's
Mm-hmm.
even more difficult. Outside your conference, even more difficult. Because teams prepare for the teams in their division. So I wouldn't worry too much of the Steelers. I think the Steelers will be fine.
Yeah, no, I mean look, they've clinched their playoff place. They've won the division. What we've, as I said in the intro, we might see the Baltimore Ravens potentially sneak up and take that third place off them. But to me, they've certainly proven themselves to be the third best team in AFC so far this season. The results don't lie, but what they're going to want to do, they want to try and maintain that third seed.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a key thing. But let's move on now to the third and final game. We're going to focus on a little bit more detail. And again, in the AFC, so let's focus on the Houston Texans, who clinched their second consecutive AFC South division with their victory over their 2012 victory over the Miami Dolphins. But look, I think we need to say is before we go through this game and discuss it in more detail, I think we need to say that our thoughts with Grant, Miami Dolphins wide receiver Grant Dubos, and with his friends and family at the moment. So for those who haven't seen it, the wide receiver suffered a pretty serious and very sort of scary looking head injury during the game. The game was stopped. When that kind of stuff happens, it's incredibly scary. The players were making prayer circles around him, and as a fan, you're there just wondering what happened. And he's remained in hospital in Houston, and he didn't travel back with the team. Now, obviously, the latest is that The Dolphins have had positive feedback, which is great. But on behalf of everybody from across the gridiron, we just want to wish Dubas a speedy recovery. And don't want to speak for you, Eddie. So I don't know if you want to say anything else on that.
No, absolutely. My thoughts and prayers go to him and his family. And we see it a lot of times in our football over here. I think one that comes to mind is Christian Eriksen. When he went down during the Euros, and then of course everyone kind of rallied around, and the medical people swung into action. And that's the one thing we've got to say as well, to the medical people that come in and they really avoid what could potentially be something more disastrous. So we've got to say some high praise, for those medical guys too as well. But yeah, I thought some prayers, to him and the family, and also to the Miami Dolphins.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely 100% right on the medical staff. They were the real MVPs of that game yesterday. Just shows how important they are. So yeah, look, let's move on to the game itself then. And look, this just was not a pretty game for the Miami Dolphins, was it, Eddie? The offense just did not show up, especially in the second half. The defense did. They sacked CJ Stroud, the Texans QB. They sacked him 4 times. But the offense just had an off day, 3 interceptions for Tua, despite only having 1 of his previous 7 games. And for me, that's their playoff hopes done for this season. There's no way for them to come back. The big question for me leading into next season is we've seen this Dolphins team year after year after year just struggle to beat the big teams. This year they only have 1 win against a team with a winning record this season, and they just seem brittle to me. Now, I know you took great privilege in highlighting this shower, shall we say, at the beginning of the show. But what's your thoughts on the Dolphins?
Listen, I was riding with the Dolphins. I was swimming with the Dolphins. I was having a nice time. We're out, or we're off the tour train now.
It's been derailed. It's been derailed.
I don't know. This was a painful loss, I have to say. I think they're done. They're not just done, but they're burnt to a crisp. You can stick a fork in the Miami Dolphins right now, because they had one job. Beat the Texans and keep your playoffs hopes alive. And sometimes you have these things with teams where they just can't seem to get over the hump. Tell me about it. I know I'm going to insert the Dallas Cowboys here, because, they're just very typical. I don't know why we're supporting teams that have this sort of pains, right? Because the Cowboys, brilliant, in the regular season, terrible in the postseason. And the Dolphins, beat everyone else, but struggle against big things. And you wonder whether it's a psychological thing, right? You bring it back to our football, and, when the big games come, how people always do this, mini league table and say, how many games have you won against the big teams? Whether you're an Arsenal or you're Manchester United or a Manchester City, those games are important, not just because of the points, but because of the mentality and the psychology that happens when you win these games. I think it just feeds into the confidence for the next one. And when you keep losing them, you're almost beaten before you get on the pitch, because, sometimes you're thinking, can we actually get it done? And until you get it done, you don't know, right? And you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's one of the things that, makes them stand out, from other teams, because they've done this so many times. They could be down by double digits, in the fourth quarter, but everyone is calm. Everyone is calm. And it was a horrible game for the Dolphins to lay an egg. Dolphins do lay eggs, but maybe they don't lay eggs. Do the Dolphins lay eggs? I think they give birth, to other baby dolphins. But they had a bad game. It was a bad game, for all your Avengers not to show up. And Tua's got to take some blame, here. At some point, you have to stop being potential and start being production, right?
Yeah.
And now he's the former. It hurts to say, but he is looking like the former. He's got to start taking these games and leading his team to victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Dolphins. I think this is just a season you've kind of got to write off. I think they just gave them too much to do, themselves too much to do. You know, if you look since Tua's come back, they've got a winning record since he's come back. And as I said last week, and I stand by this, you have Tua in that team all season, and the Dolphins are a winning side. Yeah, over the course of the season. But we've said this before. Parcells has said, "You are your record," and their record is a losing side, and that goes, for the production just wasn't there when Tua wasn't playing, when he was on the shelf. But they had a bad game, and I think they had to go lights out pretty much when Tua came back to give them a shot. They maybe were allowed one dip, and they had that dip against the Packers because the Dolphins, we don't like playing in cold. And it was every game became must win, and I think after a while that pressure would get to you. It almost got to them against the Jets last week. They got that overtime victory in the clutch last week, and I just think they came up against a good football side in the Texans, whose defense, Tua played poorly, the offense played poorly, and it's not just Tua, it's the whole offense, but the Texans showed up. Defensively, they showed up and they won, and they deserved the win. But let's take it off Miami and just quickly touch on Houston. Obviously, that's them clinching their divisional title again. Chances are, obviously, they're going to be the 4th seed in the AFC playoff race. How far do you see them going?
I still think that they're a young team, right? They've done very well, and I don't think the Texans are going to be judged this season if they don't get to the Super Bowl. I think when you have a quarterback that's in the second year, and there are very few quarterbacks that have gone to the Super Bowl in the second year. Famous Russell Wilson did that in the second year, got to the Super Bowl and won. But it's very hard to do, which is why a lot of teams, quarterbacks don't do that. So you've got a young coach, you've got, a young quarterback. You lost, Stephon Diggs, pretty early on in the season, so he wasn't able to contribute. You've got, players that are really, really just. I think right now, they are playing above what is expected of them. Right, I think they're overachieving. So I think you get into the playoffs. If you get a win, that's great. And I think you consider that as a success, the Texans. I don't see them troubling, the likes of, Lamar, the Ravens, the Steelers, or the Chiefs. So I think, in that AFC, you're looking at the Chiefs, you're looking at the Ravens, you're looking at the Steelers, in that order, potentially.
Or the Bills.
Yeah, or the Bills, right? Don't forget the Bills. Actually, I would say, let me reverse the order. I'll say Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, and Steelers. And then you've got, the Texans coming just below that pack. So they've got to run a gauntlet, to be able to do something in the playoff.
Hey, well said. It's the good news is CJ Stroud, second year, wins the division 2 years in a row. So that's positive. But yeah, look, I think that's enough for part one. So we will be back in part two, where we will go through our regular feature of touchdown or turnover. We will see you on the other side.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad.
Steps into it, pass is caught. Diggs, sideline, touchdown, unbelievable. Vikings win it.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to part two of Across the Gridiron. Now it's time for our special feature. As always, it's touchdown or turnover. This is a segment where we look at three things that have really caught our eye over the weekend and decide if it's a winning moment, is this something that's going to continue, or if it's a one-off or a flop, or it's just not gonna see anything from it. And this week we're actually having a bit of an NFC special with all three things we're going to talk about specifically for the NFC playoff race. So let's start off with the LA Rams. Now, the Rams followed up their victory over the Bills last weekend, and they won again on Thursday Night Football, beating the San Francisco 49ers in what I thought was a pretty dreary 12-6 victory. Good God, this was a hard watch. They go top of the NFC West on an 8-6 record, puts them as 4th seed, and it's an incredibly tight division. You know, you've got the Seattle Seahawks who are also on 8-6, and the Arizona Cardinals on 7-7. And even the San Francisco 49ers, you can't discount them just yet because they're only 2 games behind. So the question I have for you, Eddie, based on these last 2 performances especially, do you think the Rams are going to secure their position as the leaders of the NFC West? So touchdown or turnover on that one?
Touchdown for me. I'm calling it. The Rams are heating up at the right time.
Case over. End the season now. Stop the count. Call it done.
The Rams are heating up at just the right time. Stafford is back, and the defense is making big plays. I think no other way to announce your dominance than to play a game like the one they played against the 49ers. It was a snooze fest.
Bore the fans to death. Yes, absolutely.
I know, and it was a Thursday night game, and it's very late for us here in the UK, so I don't even bother to stay up to watch it. I just wait and watch it later on.
Yeah, I watched the highlights. I was bored with the 10-minute highlight package. When you go onto the official NFL YouTube channel and you put the highlight packages, to give you an idea, I've just rewatched the Bills and the Lions. A 20-minute highlight package. Okay, that's a good game. You had the Rams and it was 10 minutes. I'm like, 10 minutes? What happened in this game? And the answer was F4. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. Listen, right. But you know what? That's how you've got to do it, right? It was a bad game for a lot of the wide receivers, but it just shows you a different side of the Rams, right? It tells you what good coaching is, good game management, which can be said for a lot of teams in the NFL. Winning a game in the NFL is not just about having talent on the pitch. It's managing all the other things as well. Clock management, we talked about that a few times. Understanding the rhythm of the game, and just making sure that you take the win. And you go into the game and like, this is not the kind of game that we're going to score touchdown over touchdown. So you know what? We're going to keep it tight. Don't do anything crazy. Don't give away penalties and walk away with a win. So you know what? I think the Rams are going in, and I bet you teams are going to underestimate the Rams. And you've got a Super Bowl winning coach, a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I don't think anyone should take them lightly. They're going to be a problem for people.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you there. I'd say probably touchdown as well. I don't think it'll be a lock. I'm not going to call it as early as you do because I can guarantee in a week's time you'll be locking the Seattle Seahawks down. You Mr. Hot Takes himself. But I think you're right. I mean, look, they've got a coach who's been there. They've got a quarterback who's been there. You look at the other teams who they're up against. I mean, the 49ers have been there as well, but they're just in no form at all. You've got the Seahawks. Geno Smith, been a very solid quarterback this year, but you'd probably say Stafford over Smith. Yeah, and then I would say that the Rams are certainly favourites to take that spot. And I think that we joke and say it was a dull as dishwater, that game, but I think it's obviously really important. I mean, coming off that win, can you imagine what the response would have been had they lost that game? Even if they just conceded one touchdown and they lost 14, 15, 12 or whatever it would be. They had such a great victory and such a great performance over the Bills. When you have these statement victories or these, what seems like a big one-off victory, the worst thing you could do is just not turn up the weekend after the next week. Yeah. Right, because you've killed all momentum, all goodwill. You see in every single sport, you beat one of the high flyers in the league, and then next week you lose it just kills all momentum. So they've got in, it's a hard fought, they've ground out a dull victory, but the only thing that's going to matter is that one that they're going to have in the end, the 1 point that gets added to their win record. They take the W, that's it. So I think that was a strong, a very, very important result, because if they had lost, they'd be on the same record as the 49ers, who we've pretty much all but written off. So I'm with you on that one. Now let's move on to the next one. And let's look at the Minnesota Vikings, who we've touched on them earlier in part one. But on Sunday, they had a resounding 30-12 victory over the Chicago Bears. They have officially clinched their position in the postseason, even though they are fifth seed. So it's kind of one of these weird looking things where you have the teams who have clinched the playoffs in the NFC are seeds 1, 2, and 5, which just all looks a bit weird. But that's because the Lions are the first seed and in the same division. But touchdown or turnover, Eddie, do we think that the Minnesota Vikings can continue this push and continue to push the Lions and the Eagles and possibly even take the first seed position in the NFC?
Listen, if I'm the Lions or I'm the Vikings, I know who I want to be. I want to be the Vikings. And the reason why is because the Vikings' next 3 games, it's all in their hands. They've got divisional games against the Packers, the Lions, right? And they've also got the Seahawks. So if they win all 3 of their games, they're going to take the number 1 seed because they're going to beat the Lions as well, as part of that. So I definitely want to be in the Vikings. And, the Vikings are sneaking, their way into prominence. They've got the same record now, as the Lions. They've won, games in a row. They've won tough divisional games. They dismantled the Bears that the Lions struggled with, to get a win over. So I'm calling touchdown, on the Vikings because I think that, they've got a chance that, this is one of those things where, you're climbing up a ladder and they say, don't look down, because you're doing so well. don't look down. You're doing so well. I think the Vikings just need to keep looking up. Don't bother thinking, oh, you know what, we're going to get to the number 1 seed. Just win the next game. Win the next game and then win the next game. And then you never know. You could be the number 1 seed and have home field advantage all the way to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, you mentioned running. It depends if you're glass half full or half empty. Yeah. Obviously, I know you're a very positive man, Eddie. You're always half full, aren't you? I've seen you on a dance floor. You're always incredibly positive. But you've mentioned there. Who do you say it was? The Lions, the Packers, and the Seahawks. So they are 3 teams we've all mentioned as still having playoff aspirations. These are all teams they've got games to play for, and it's okay playing the Chicago Bears and beating the Chicago Bears. They're 3 teams who all have something to play for, who are all in and out. Now, the half empty bit is, wow, they are tough games and they could easily lose one of them, right? But a half full would be, as you said, it's in their own hands. And what a statement that would be if they go out and win every one of those games. Think about the momentum they would carry into the playoffs. Knowing they've just beaten the Lions, they've beaten the Packers, and they've beaten Seahawks, they will fear nobody.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about this before. Momentum, right? Winning breeds winning, and if they can go and they can win those 3 games, position themselves at the first seed, it'll be hard. It would be hard to argue for them the chance of them going to the Super Bowl purely based on that momentum alone. But let's see how things go. It's 1 game at a time for them. Could they challenge? Yes. Do I think they will? I see them slip it up.
Oh, okay.
I'd see them slipping up in one of those games.
Okay.
I can't tell you which one, but I think they've done incredibly well. Sam Darnold's been absolutely fantastic for them this season.
Yeah,
they deserve to be in that playoff place. I can see them going potentially, even if the 2nd or 3rd seed, I can see them potentially getting to the divisional. It all depends on how the Lions go with those injuries we've talked about. It depends how Barkley comes back after being roughed up, obviously last week. There's still a lot of unknowns, and as you said, Dan Campbell potentially has the capacity of doing something too aggressive in a game, like try and do an onside kick as the first punt return. Yeah. So, but yeah, I look, fair play to them. I don't think they'll take the top seed, but I think they should be incredibly proud of what they've done this season. Okay, so the last one we're going to look at is again in the NFC, as we said, the Green Bay Packers. Now, I've got a friend who's a big Green Bay a big Green Bay fan, so I don't want to give them too much credit. But they're looking strong, aren't they? You know, they won again 30-13 against the Seahawks, who are obviously in that playoff chase themselves. You know, they're all but guaranteed. You know, they've got a 99.99999% chance of securing their sort of playoff spot. And that's despite them being the 6th seed out of potential 7. But they have a better record than the Buccaneers. They have a better record than the Rams. So again, looking at the NFC title as a whole, do you think they can challenge for the NFC title?
No, I don't.
Right, move on. Right, okay. So thank you for watching Across the Gridiron.
No, I don't. I still think that they're a competing team, right? But I don't think they're built now for deep runs in the playoffs. I just don't see them. You know, I think that they're gonna be competitive. You know, they're gonna be competitive. I know that they played the Lions very close. You know, even when the Lions beat them, it was a 1-score game. But I still think that, you know, they're short. You know, they're short. Just a little short.
No, I think that's a fair comment. I think again they've done well. The young quarterback in, to have a good, strong winning record is obviously no easy feat. The NFC is a very sort of challenging division. But yeah, I think you mentioned the same when we were talking about the Houston the Texans in part 1, how you've got your core group in the AFC and you've got Texans maybe just one rung below that. That's kind of where I see the Packers. Now, no one's going to want to go to Green Bay, right?
It's cold.
It is.
It's freezing.
I mean, obviously, my testicles flinch at just the idea of going to Green Bay. But the problem is, because they're going to be a lower seed, they're going to be away most. They're going to be away.
Yeah.
They don't have that home field advantage.
No, they don't have the home field advantage.
So I think they one and done, maybe 2. Yeah. But you know, they're looking strong. They're looking good. It'd be a good season for them. But no, I agree. I think that's a turnover. I can't see them challenging the big boys in the NFC. So excellent. So I think that's it for touchdown turnover. I think that's it for part 2. We will see you again in part 3, where we will do our predictions and see if Eddie, for the first time in doing this, has he actually had a week when he has beaten me in predictions. Stay tuned in part 3 to find out if he actually has.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the
everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of Across the Gridiron. Right, we have talked the highlights of week 15. We have done touchdown and turnovers. Now it's time for my favorite part of the week, where we look at our predictions and we look at our picks for last week, and then we'll also make picks for this week too. Now, the reason why it's my favorite part, me and Eddie have been doing this now for 4 or 5 weeks, and in that 4 or 5 weeks, I don't think Eddie has beaten me once.
It's happening today, guys.
Well, it certainly didn't happen last week. So let's quickly review how we got on last week. We had the first game that we picked was the Rams versus the 49ers. We both picked Rams in what turned out to be the most boring game pretty much of the week. Now, the next one we had was the Cowboys versus the Panthers. Now, Eddie will always go with the Cowboys because he's unable to do anything different. I went for the Panthers just to annoy Eddie, but of course the Dallas Cowboys actually won. So Eddie takes that one there. We then had Chiefs and the Browns, and despite Mahomes actually going off injured at some point during that game, you know, he just got squashed under a load of bodies. So it'll be interesting to see how he picks up for this weekend. The Chiefs still chiefed, and they won, and we both got that one right. We both thought that the Dolphins would show up against the Texans in their must-win game, and we both got that wrong. Now, Eddie, you're going into this last game actually up 3-2. How are you feeling going into this last?
I'm feeling very, very confident, right? I'm feeling confident. I think this is it.
But then the problem is the last game we had was the Lions and the Bills, and you picked the Lions and I picked the Bills. So there we go. So we actually drew week 15. It was we got 3 right each. So
almost.
You were so close, so near, yet so far. I came back with that last minute winner in injury time just to steal that point at last minute equaliser. So that takes us overall to Eddie. You have a massive 18 right, but that's nothing compared to yours truly. Still 4 games ahead with 22. Now we're going to pick another.
Come on.
Hey, it's a big week now coming into this. We've got another 5 games to pick for you. Yep. Yeah. And again, for people just to, to see behind the script, Eddie picks all these games. So Eddie could pick absolute bankers for himself, which he never seems to do. Okay, so let's see if you can bring it back this week then, Eddie. So the first match that you have picked, now we spent a lot of time talking about the Minnesota Vikings in part 2, and we talked about how they could potentially be contenders for the first seed in the NFC. Now they are away to the Seattle Seahawks. Eddie, where do you see this one going?
Vikings. Geno Smith's hot. I think the Seahawks magic is running out. Vikings by 10.
Wow, you're even going for the actual amount they're going to win by. That is very brave, Eddie. Very brave. I admire it. Now I'm also going for the Vikings. I'm not going to tell you how many they're going to win by because I'm not crazy. But yeah, look, I think the Vikings we talked about, they've got that momentum. Seahawks lost last week. The only thing that's digging at me is the fact that Seahawks need to win this. Yeah. Vikings are confirmed. The Vikings are there. I think they're going to look. They've got that first seed, second seed in their sights. But at the end of the day, they can. But I suppose the thing is for the Vikings, they almost have to win this as well, because if they don't win, if they do lose the game, it's not about just coming. Okay, we could go from third to first. This is if they don't win that division, they're going to be the highest they can finish is 5th in terms of the seeding, right? So they have to go up for it. So I'm also going for the Vikings as well. So moving on to the next game, this is the obligatory section where we talk about Dallas Cowboys. Nobody else wants to hear about a Dallas Cowboys apart from you, Eddie. But they are at home. They host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next week. Where do you see this one going?
Cowboys playing at home. Cowboys are back. The Bucs win this game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not even going to try and argue that one. Look, the Bucs are just, I think they are playing some really good stuff at the moment. They're in really good form. Baker Mayfield's found a home, massive redemption story. Throwing his body around, making plays. He's in hot form. You've got Mike Evans looking great, Hall of Famer in the making there, against a Cowboys team who just don't know what to do with themselves. Do they want to win? Do they want to tank? Make your mind up.
Tank properly this week, guys.
Tank properly this week. Tank properly. That is what your loyal fan base is telling you to do. So yeah, I'm going for the Bucs with that one as well. So. Eagles Commanders. Eagles away to the Commanders. I mean, Washington looking good. The interesting thing I've noticed about this game is that the TV in America have flexed this game up to a better TV spot.
Yeah,
they've and the team they've got rid of, the Miami Dolphins. They've bumped the Miami Dolphins and Chicago Bears, I think it is, to Browns. Sorry, the Miami Dolphins versus the Cleveland Browns. They've bumped that for this game. And to be fair, I completely agree with them. So who have you got for this one?
Eagles lock it up. Hurts puts up 250 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Book it. Go to the casino and book this. Because I think that the Eagles lock this one up against the Commanders. They're too good. I know it's a divisional game and it was close last time, but they're gonna win.
Yeah, as we've been saying, the Eagles can't take the foot off the gas yet, can they? There's still too much to play for in the NFC. If it was the other way around and it was the Chiefs, and you think, okay, well, they've pretty much locked up their first seed, it might be time to start to resting players. Eagles can't do that yet. So again, I'm going with you on that one. So I'm just making sure you can't beat me. So our fourth pick is the Steelers, who are traveling to the Ravens. Now, this is a close game to call. This is a big game.
This is one. This is the one.
Go on then. Who have you got? Who are you picking for this one?
I trust Mike Tomlin. I've been saying it. I trust Mike Tomlin. I don't know if the Ravens have figured out, what they want to be. One game, Lamar is throwing for 5 touchdowns. The other game, he's not. So I'm gonna go with Tomlin. I think this is they play the Ravens very close. So I'm gonna go with the Steelers on this one.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they respond to defeat. As I said, it was a hard-fought game that they came up short against the Eagles. You've got, yeah. Again, this is a tough one. This is a tough one to call, but I think I'm going for the Ravens. One, to keep things interesting, because it'll be very boring with the same picks all the way through, right? But two, I think that the Ravens, again, they picked up the win last weekend.
Yeah,
they know now they've got a chance of overtaking the Steelers potentially into that third place position. It's at Baltimore. The Ravens have been inconsistent. They've lost games, but it wasn't that long ago we were talking about Henry over Barkley. Henry's got a better chance of winning the MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, than Barkley. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about Lamar Jackson in the MVP conversation. Now, are the Steelers maybe a better all-round team? Well, I think they have been this season, but I think the Ravens have the weapons. They have to win this. They will want to win this game. It's not must lose, not must win for them. But I think they're going to go all to win it. So I'm sticking for the Ravens for that one. And then the final one is the Texans and the inevitable Kansas City Chiefs. Where do you see this one, young man?
Chiefs might be playing with Carson Wentz. In this game.
Yeah,
it's a smart thing to do. That's what I would do. There's no need putting Mahomes in harm's way. This is another podcast because, Carson Wentz, I've got a whole lot that I want to say about him, but another podcast will talk.
I know you like to drop a few Carson Wentz digs in there every once in a while, don't you?
I do. But on this occasion, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I just think that the Chiefs finally had a game to be proud of last week, right? Where they beat a team convincingly instead of sneaking and doing magic to win games. But I think they're going to need magic again without Mahomes. So I'm going to say the Chiefs' magic comes to the fore and they beat the Texans.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with the Chiefs. I think I'm sticking with the Chiefs as well, because we said before, you just don't, you can't not bet on the Chiefs.
And I said I'm not picking against them.
I know you said you're not going to pick against them again. So, I don't know why you keep putting the Chiefs in this. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's going to boil down very much to who's the starting quarterback for the Chiefs. If it's Mahomes, then yeah. But I think you're right. The smart play is to maybe take him out, but it depends how his injury is, right? He might be absolutely fine. He might be bouncing around the practice field, lobbing the ball all over the place and be absolutely fine. He might just do with the rest. So, but for now, I'm sticking with the Chiefs. It will be a much closer game. I mean, look, Houston had their massive win. Houston have clinched their place. They've done their job. They've clinched the division. If they were smart, they'd be resting CJ Stroud.
Yeah,
they'd be resting their big players now. They have done their job. They have got the 4th place locked in. I can't see them taking over. I can't see them finishing with a better record than the Steelers.
Yeah.
So I think 4th is pretty much where they are now. It's where they're going to stay. I would be, sure, Stroud should get a few reps in, but I think they should be just trying to rest some of their star players when they can. And I just think the Chiefs will come and win that. So there are picks. let's see. It looks like you can only make up one on me this week, but there's still plenty of time to go. We've got the playoff season to come, and I might even have a couple little surprises when it comes to the playoffs in terms of how we actually do these predictions as well. Just really to throw the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit more, as we say here in the UK. But look, I mean that's it again, suppose, for this week of Across the Gridiron. Massive thank you to Eddie as always, and massive thank you to everyone who's watching this video, who interacts with us. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your parents. Tell your grandma, she'll love it.
Yeah.
Tell everybody you want to do. And so, Eddie, as always, thank you, and I'll let you take us home.
Yeah, listen, guys, the NFL is like life, right? 1 week you're up, next week you're down on the turf, wondering how you got there. We've seen playoff dreams get crushed, a la Dolphins. Team rise from their ashes with the Rams, and MVP races turn into coronations. But here's the thing, right? This is where legends are made. December football is not for the weak. You got players out there fighting for contracts, legacies, and one shot at greatness. So take Josh Allen, right? My man walked into Detroit house, flipped over the kitchen table and said, "This is my house now." And that's what MVPs do. But listen, everybody loves a comeback story. The Rams are making one. The Ravens are locking. The Steelers are still breeding. And don't sleep on the Lions, okay? They had a bad game, but don't sleep on the Lions. So listen, guys, remember, drop your takes in the comments as well. Who's locking up the number 1 seed? Who's playing? Who's pulling off the upset of the week? And if is Josh Allen your MVP, or you're still riding with some of the others, right? Let us know, and we'll shout out the best one next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking time, Eddie. So thanks for watching, everyone, and Merry Christmas.
I'm the bad guy.